Attacks and breaches come in all shapes, sizes, and no industry is immune. And unfortunately, these attacks are becoming more and more frequent, especially during this crazy time. So from stolen credentials to ransomware attacks to insider threats, it's a scary time for customers and consumers. When we read such things as confirmed data breaches in the healthcare industry have increased by 58% this year, or scams have increased by 400% during this pandemic, or worldwide cybercrime costs will hit $6 trillion annually by 2021. And my personal favorite, the search term, how to remove a virus, has increased by 42% this year. So there's definitely a good reason to be afraid, and there are absolutely some uncomfortable and intimidating conversations that need to occur. So with these increased number of breaches and the increased cost of an attack, having the right security tools and security strategy in place has become beyond critical. So from a technology perspective, how do we handle these conversations? Well, one of the topics or tools we use when we have security conversations surrounding policy, process, procedures is Red Hat's continuous IT security methodology. So this methodology encompasses 5 steps: design, build, run, manage, adapt. Now, these aren't linear phases. They're more like a series of interconnected gears. When one turns, it moves the others, thereby moving each part of the security plan in sync. When we refer to design, we're talking about collaborative workflows and accountable processes. We're talking about defining security controls and requirements and clearly developing those security standards and workflows. When we're in the build phase, we focus on automating and integrating from the perspective of security testing, process development, and building security into your infrastructure, applications, and processes. Within this phase, we use automation for continuous security feedback throughout the stages of the application lifecycle. In the run phase, or third gear, we continue to automate and integrate, expanding beyond the traditional security models or the manual methods that aren't compatible with the new distributed technologies such as cloud. Now, within this phase, whether you're using physical, virtual, private, or public cloud, your infrastructure should be embedded with security-enhanced platforms. Investing in tools that handle the automation of security and configuration changes, audits, and remediation are key. So this includes maintaining an up-to-date catalog of assets and actively managing users and their access. Within this phase, we make sure you have both infrastructure as code and security as code. This ensures you have repeatable, shareable, and verifiable infrastructure. And of course, helps with the compliance audits that everybody loves. Now, as we all are aware, the security landscape changes fast, and you have to adapt just as fast. You need to plan and revise regularly in accordance with governance and audit requirements. At Technologent, we use analytics and automation to help our customers adapt and deploy rapid responses to security threats. Having a partner to guide you through the patches, fixes, and recovery is critical to keeping your business on track. So you can see each phase works together like a series of gears, how they come together like they are pieces, and we're building a puzzle. So by following the methodology, we can drill into the strategic conversations necessary to make these pieces fit into the goals of our customers. At Technologent, we work with some key partners that provide the tools to develop and automate within the security landscape. Red Hat is a best-of-breed partner in these areas. They work closely with our security automation teams to ensure we provide our customers the best solutions possible and together help them achieve their goals. Now, we can't have a conversation about goals without discussing inhibitors. So if I were to pose the question, how comfortable are you with your security posture? If I had you apply a number from 0 to 100% comfortable, what percentage would you give? If you didn't answer I'm 100% comfortable, what's preventing you from getting there? What strategy or plan hasn't been defined to help you achieve your company's goal? What key piece is missing for you to complete that journey? Perhaps it's one of the pieces we just discussed, or perhaps it's a different piece entirely. At Technologent, we have deep engineering expertise in each of these areas and beyond. During our strategic conversations, Technologent serves as an integrator, where we are the glue that puts the best-of-breed offerings from Red Hat and other various vendors together to provide that true holistic solution to our customers. We are your solutions provider, helping develop a plan or strategy based off of your goals and fill any missing pieces. And with a 3-to-1 engineer to sales rep ratio, Technologent has the engineering expertise within your reach to help you and your teams achieve any goal. We're here to make that uncomfortable journey of transition and change comfortable and make sense of the chaos. So I invite you to continue the conversation with us after this session. Let's discuss what benefits a security assessment can have in your environment, from identifying security gaps, developing a risk mitigation roadmap, and helping to control your security spend. Let's sit down and talk about the importance of prevention and preparedness. So meet with the team, learn what a POC looks like, get a deep dive on security automation and the benefits within your environment. There are a few of the team members listed here, and I'm happy to make that introduction to them. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I'm just Trent at Technologent.com. I joke that my last name's an atrocity, so they were nice enough to give me an alias. So yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce one of the world's most respected authorities on the subject of forgery, embezzlement, and document security, an author, a lecturer, a consultant, and an absolute legend in the field, Mr. Frank Abagnale Jr. Frank, we cannot thank you enough for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be with you. I wish I could be there in person, but glad to be with all of you today, and thank everyone for attending.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. So, Frank, I have a bunch of questions for you. First thing I'm going to start with, though, is the Hollywood version that we've seen. A lot of folks are familiar with that, but would you mind taking some time to introduce yourself and walk us through the official version, please?
I've had a lot of people tell my story. I had a great writer write a book about my life, a great film director make a movie about my life, a great Broadway musical team make a Tony Award-winning Broadway musical about my life. And of course, like all creative people, they told the story from their point of view. So let me just take a minute to tell you the story from my point of view. I was raised just north of New York City. When I was about 16 years old, my parents decided after 23 years of marriage to get a divorce. I ended up standing in front of a judge at 16 who told me I had to choose one of my parents. That was a choice a 16-year-old boy couldn't make, so I ran out of the courtroom. I ended up in the streets of New York. Back in the 1960s, running away was very popular with young people. Unfortunately, a lot of them got into Haight-Ashbury, the hippie scene, the drug scene. I ended up on the streets of New York and realized I was just 16. No one was going to pay any attention to me, and the only asset that I had that as I looked a little older. So back then I had a driver's license at 16 in New York, didn't have a photo on it, it was an IBM card. So I altered one digit of my date of birth in April of 1948. I dropped the 4, converted it to a 3, and that made me 10 years older or 26 years old. I had a checking account since I was 14. I had a little money in the account, so I would write checks to supplement my income on part-time jobs I had, but I quickly realized I couldn't support myself, but I also found it very easy to write those checks. So I started writing checks, and as many people know, I ended up impersonating an airline pilot for Pan Am for a couple of years. I practiced law in a Georgia hospital, practiced medicine in a Georgia hospital, passed the bar in Louisiana, practiced law there for about a year. And by the time I was old enough to drink, I had written more than $2.5 million in bad checks in 26 foreign countries and 50 US states. Like all criminals, eventually I was caught. I was arrested by the French police when I was 21 years old. They actually arrested me on a warrant issued by the Swedish police who were looking for me for forgery in Sweden, but they quickly realized I had forged checks all over France, so they refused to honor the warrant. They later convicted me of forgery and sent me to French prison. When my term was up in France, I was extradited to Sweden, where I was convicted of forgery and sent to a Swedish penitentiary in Malmö, Sweden. When my prison term was up in Sweden, U.S. federal authorities returned me to the United States, and a U.S. federal judge sentenced me to 12 years in federal prison. I served 4 of those 12 years at a federal prison in Petersburg, Virginia. When I was 26 years old, the government offered to take me out of prison on the condition I go to work with an agency of the federal government for the remainder of my sentence or until my parole had been completed. I agreed and was released. This year, I'm celebrating 43 years with the FBI. I have been there for more than 4 decades. I've been married to my one and only wife for 42 years. I have 3 sons, 5 grandchildren. My oldest boy is actually an FBI agent who is now celebrating 14 years in the Bureau. He runs the Bureau's Crisis Negotiations Unit out of Quantico, Virginia. During my career of 43 years, I've given over 3,000 seminars. Back 40 years ago, it was all about forgery and embezzlement, credit card fraud, and of course today all about cybercrime. So crime changes often. The way the criminal acts and thinks doesn't change, but the crime changes quite a lot. So I've had to keep up with crime and change considerably. I've had the honor to teach at the FBI Academy for 4 decades. I've taught 2 generations of FBI agents during my career. And of course, the first 20 years, I did a lot with developing technology that went into paper and plastic for car titles, birth certificates, driver's licenses, negotiable instruments. And the last 20 years, I've worked with technology companies simply to look at the technology, to try and find the weaknesses in them before they actually go to the marketplace and someone compromises them. So it's been an amazing journey. I'm very fortunate. I live in a great country where I had the ability to turn my life around and do something positive with it. And I'm happy to be with you today. And of course, happy to answer any questions anyone has.
No, that's awesome, Frank. So something you said is keeping up with the crime. I'm curious how has technology changed crime from when you did it 50 years ago?
What's amazing to me today is that it's 4,000 times easier today than when I did it 50 years ago. Technology breeds crime. It always has, and it always will. And there will always be people willing to use technology in a negative, self-serving way. And the easiest way for me to explain that is, back 50 years ago, for me to forge a check and make it a 4-color, very impressive document, I needed to operate a Heidelberg printing press. That was $1 million press 50 years ago. There were color separations, there were negatives, there were plates, there were typesetting, and of course, there were chemicals that you had to work with. Once you develop that check, then someone might have walked up and said to me, "So Frank, how do you know where this Pan Am banks?" And my answer would be, "I don't know. I'm just making up a bank's name." "Well, how do you know their account number?" "I don't know. I'm just put a bunch of numbers on there." "How do you know who the authorized signer is?" "I have no idea. I'm just making up a name." 50 years later, I can sit down at a computer, open my laptop, design the most beautiful 4-color check in 15 minutes, go to the corporate company's website, capture their logo, put it on the check, capture the bank's logo, put it on the check, put the Mickerline account number on. But we live in a way too much information world today. So all I have to do is call the victim, the corporation, and simply ask to speak to someone in accounts receivables and tell them I'm getting ready to pay an invoice and I would need their wiring instructions. They will tell me where they bank, what their account number is, what their routing number is. And if I call up and ask for their corporate accounts, I can simply ask for someone in corporate communications and simply say, "Can you send me a copy of your annual report?" And they'll mail it out to me, but on page 3 is a signature of the chairman of the board, the CEO, the CFO, the treasurer, the controller. White glossy paper, black ink, camera ready art. You scan it, you digitize it, you put it on the check. All of these things have become so much easier and of course so much more global that you can commit these crimes from thousands of miles away, and the chance of ever being caught is getting slimmer. The chance of being prosecuted is slimmer than that. So I tell people all the time, once you lose your money, you're never going to get your money back. So it'd be much wiser not to lose it to begin with.
No, I always, some of our security guys, I joke around with them and say, having a beer at 5 o'clock and listening to some of these security stories is amazing. So thank you for sharing that. So we just reviewed the continuous security approach from Red Hat, and we have a huge push for our customers to incorporate automation into their security landscape, embedded into their processes. Is this something you're seeing more frequently utilized, or also pushing companies to incorporate automation into their environment?
Absolutely. I've been a big fan of automation. If we go back 15 years ago in banking, the teller at the bank had to be trained how to spot a counterfeit check, how to spot an altered check, how to spot a counterfeit bill. Today, that has all been removed through automation. The teller doesn't make those decisions. The system makes that decision with 100% accuracy most of the time. So we've removed that. And it's the same thing that you have to automate. And if you can't automate, you have to educate. Education is the most powerful tool to fighting crime. They call me the father of social engineering. Believe me, when I was 16 years old, I didn't know I was social engineering anybody on the telephone, but I guess I was. But what I do know is 50 years later, that there is no technology, there never will be any technology, including AI, that can defeat social engineering. Only education can do that. You have to educate the call center individual. You have to educate the individual about they're being socially engineered. But if you can put automation in there, the more you take away the weakest link, which unfortunately is the human being, and you can make those decisions accurately through automation, the less crime you're going to have and the less risk you're going to have.
Yeah, when we have our conversations around ransomware and things like that, that's the emotional effect, the emotional aspect of those ransomware pieces. It's that's the hardest thing to prepare for and prevent. So that's interesting. So I'm going to switch. Go ahead. Go ahead and comment on that, Frank. I think we.
I mentioned to you that I live in South Carolina. I actually live within a mile of Black Bog, who just had a tremendous breach. And what happens here is that they pay the ransom and they say that everything was destroyed. We don't know that. You're dealing with criminals. How can you believe a criminal actually destroyed it? And would a smart criminal destroy it, or would they hold on to it for a few years and then sell that information to someone else? So that's a horrible position to be in, to have to pay a ransom and then still not be sure that your information that was stolen has been actually destroyed.
Yeah, there's a process that we go through when it comes to ransomware, and it's preparation, prevention, detection, assessment, and recovery. And so we're obviously trying to attack it from many different levels and different angles. One of the funniest comments I ever heard during a meeting I had with a customer, and he said the criminals were really nice. They were such nice guys. So it was just easier for us to pay the ransom. I don't know if you've had that in your experience, if you met some pretty nice criminals or not, but I thought that was pretty hilarious.
They tend to be nice, but they'll rip you off as quick as they can.
That's funny. So Frank, I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk a little bit about the pandemic aspect that we're dealing with right now. And so one of the metrics we saw earlier was the scams are increasing about 400% already because of this pandemic across America. Why do you think that is? Are criminals more intelligent at this point, or are we just bored victims that are click happy?
Scammers follow the headlines. So whatever the headlines are, that's the scams. I've spent the last several years working for AARP. They're one of my clients. They are the largest organization in the world. They have 38 million members. I wrote a book that they commissioned me to write that was published last year called Scam Me If You Can. They asked me to look at every scam, scams against millennials, scams against seniors, Bitcoin scams, currency scams, stock brokerage scam, and I did all of that. And in researching the book, all of these scams have been around as long as I've been around. They only change with what is currently going on. So whether it's the grandparent scam or the sweepstakes scam or the romance scam, or if whatever is going on, then it gets typed. So we see these things about buy a vaccine, ads to get masks, preventative tools from not getting COVID. They're all scams, most of them. They're never, even when you pay it, they're never going to ship it to you, but they're just using the pandemic as a scam. The only difference I've seen, and I've been following scams most of my career, is that there are a lot of malicious scams, which I really don't understand other than hateful scams, because there's no profit to be made, there's no money to be made. They're just scams perpetrated against people to cause them harm psychologically or just to cause them physical harm. So that's a little different now with this pandemic, that we start to see some of these malicious scams that have no monetary gain to the scammer, but just to cause somebody harm.
So Frank, when, outside of calling Technologent, what is the best advice you can give people to protect themselves from these scams?
When I finished the book, I said to myself, that no matter who the scammer is, no matter how sophisticated the scammer is, or no matter how amateur the scammer is, there is always going to be two red flags in every scam. And the first red flag is, I'm going to tell you that you have to send me money immediately. You have to give me a credit card over the phone. You have to give me your bank account number over the phone. You have to go down to Walmart, get me a green dot card, stay on the phone, and read me the number off the back of the card. The other red flag is at some point I'm going to ask you for information. What's your social security number? What's your date of birth? What's your bank account number? What's your credit card number? Those have to take place. Now, it might be a romance scam that goes on for a year before that actually red flag shows up, but at some point, the red flag is going to show up in every single scam. So I tell people, when that red flag pops up, you have to remind yourself, I really don't know this person. I never actually met this person. I've either met them on the internet or I met them over a telephone. But before I part with any information or I part with any of my money, I want to make sure I know who in fact is the other person on the other end of that device.
My wife just recently got an email from Netflix saying that they're having trouble with their monthly payment, and she doesn't have a Netflix account. So it's all over the place. So very interesting. So right now we have tons of people working from home, working remote. How has that changed the way companies do cybersecurity?
I would hope that companies are actually paying attention to that, because I am very concerned that we're going to see a lot of more issues involving cybersecurity because people are working from home. So I'm working from home and I work for Social Security, I work for Medicare, I work for the IRS. I'm working from home and I have access to those systems. The question is, who else is in my house? Did I invite friends over? Is the housekeeper there? Who has access to what I'm doing on my system, and how secure am I on that system versus when I'm at work? So this is where you have to be, companies have to really pay attention to their systems and what they have in place to keep those systems safe if they're going to have people work from home and not in the environment of their secured business. I think that's very important that companies need to be looking at that if that's the route they intend to go.
Yeah, our security practice, our network practice, even our cloud and automation teams have some phenomenal conversations going on with a lot of our customers when it comes to the edge and VDI in the cloud, working from home, how to secure those whole aspects. So it's nice to hear that you saying stuff like that. So switch gears again. I read a comment from you that a quote from you that I thought was very, very interesting, and it's, cybersecurity will always be an issue until we get rid of passwords. I'd love for you to go in a little more detail on that for everyone.
I've written about 6 books on crime, going back to the 1980s. I've always said that passwords are for tree houses. You know, passwords were invented in 1964 when I was 16 years old and hadn't even done any of the things I did. And now I'm 72 years old and we are still using passwords. We know that 86% of ransomware, malware, breaches, all are caused by passwords. So for the last 6 years, I worked with a technology company called TruSona, which stands for True Persona. It's funded by Microsoft. And basically what I did is work with them to develop no password technology. So you may have seen ads on TV now where Serena Williams is running through the marketplace and she's in her jogging outfit. The only thing in her possession is her phone. She sees a necklace she wants to buy. So she walks over to the Chase ATM. She presses the bank's app on her phone. She gets her money, no card, no ATM, no password. If I call the bank's call center, they recognize me on the incoming call, but they ask me no security questions. They just ask me to press the app on my phone. And they know who I am, which means that all the people in the call center have no access to any personal information about me. They don't have my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. I think as we move along over the next few years, we're going to see, and we're already seeing banks like Bank of America and banks move to no passwords. And I think we're going to see that happen around the world. I know that TruSona is in Japan, it's in Europe, it's in London. It's starting to be very active in the United States. This is a technology that when I started to work with the company, I explained to them you can never develop that without developing anti-replay. And since no one had ever invented anti-replay, that was the first thing we had to do. But we did that, we patented it, we developed no password. And again, they're just one of many companies I work with, but one that I really am fascinated with, and also I have a lot of hope for, because if we can get rid of passwords and get people using the no password technology, will put a big dent in that ransomware. So one of the things is if you go to, for example, Aetna website, it will say to you, do you want to sign in with your password or do you want to sign in with no password? So you still give people the option because change is the most difficult part of selling that technology. People don't want to change. You got to make them feel comfortable. But I think eventually we'll see that happen as more and more companies go to a no password technology.
Very interesting. I know we talk about the 2-factor and even 3-factor authentication type of stuff, but I knew the answer. I was very interested to hear from other people to hear it. If you haven't read Frank's books, I highly recommend them. They're pretty entertaining. All right, Frank, let's have a fun question for you. So, of all the criminal activity you've been associated with as the one committing the crime, what is your most favorite or most memorable moment?
I think the most famous crime, which was not in the movie, and everything I did being a teenager, one, I had no fear because I was an adolescent. I had no fear of being caught. And everything to me was, there was a reason behind it. So the airline pilot uniform was enabled to cash checks a lot easier dressed as a pilot and to ride around the world for free. I had no desire to be an airline pilot, a doctor, or a lawyer. Everything I did, there was some kind of reason for it, a motivation behind it. And everything I did, I simply ad-libbed. So I'd gone into a Chicago bank and opened a checking account with $100. I had a phony ID, and I thought what I would do is open this account. The bank would mail me 200 printed checks with this name, and then with that ID, I'd cash those checks everywhere. So when I went in the account, the new accounts person said to me in the bank, listen, it'll be about 10 days before you get your permanent checks. In the meantime, these are some temporary checks. You should get yours in about 10 days. And I was very inquisitive. I was young. And I said, well, what about a deposit slip? If I need to make a deposit, say tomorrow. Oh, no problem. Just go over to the table, take one of the blank forms off of it, write your account number in that I just gave you, use that to your printed ones, come in. And I walked over and took a big stack of them off the shelf. But as I sat in my hotel room, I kept thinking to myself, this may work. So I went out and bought a Bose 1000 magnetic encoder. It was like a big calculator. And I magnetically encoded my account number on the bottom of every one of these blanks. I then went back to the bank, put them back on the shelf, and everyone who came in put their money directly in my account. So a lot of things I just did by, let me see if this works. And of course, as time's gone by, we fix those problems so someone else can't do it.
That was going to be my next question. What things have been put in place now that certain activities like that wouldn't be possible?
Most of my career, for example, in my early career, I worked with government printers all over the world, in Australia, in Great Britain, in the United States, because we wanted to secure what were then paper documents such as passports, car titles, birth certificates. We wanted to make checks more difficult to alter or counterfeit. So I developed a lot of security features that went into those documents, and they're still there today. For example, I developed ADP's check. I developed Paycheck's check. They write 800 million checks a year at ADP, but they still use a check I designed for them, and they have never had anyone ever counterfeit their check. So there are things you can do, whether it's in print technology or whether it's in just straight technology. We have the best technology in the world. We have the most creative people in the world. We have the best technology companies in the world. But as I tell them all the time, you have to follow through. When you develop something, whether it be a consumer product or a product for a business, you have to ask yourself, how would someone defeat this? A lot of times we rush to get it out because of return on investment, or the marketing people want it out right away because they think it's a great product and we could sell it. But always have to take the step to stop and say, how would someone defeat this? Ori Eisen, who I worked with in the development of the 41st parameter, which is now owned by Experian, and also in the development of TrueSona, he's a genius when it comes to software. But he was once asked by a CNBC reporter, why do you work with Frank Abagnale? He doesn't write code. He said, no, he doesn't write code. But I'm not a criminal. I cannot think like Frank thinks. So I play chess with Frank. I tell him this is what I did. He comes in and goes, well, that's good, but I could manipulate that by doing this. And he comes back and says, I fixed that and I put this wall up. Well, yeah, but I could still do this. Until the day he tells me that I have a really good, secure system, that's the day I put it in the marketplace. There is no foolproof system. If you believe you have a foolproof system, you have failed to take into consideration the creativity of fools. So we try to make things so difficult. I want to make it so difficult, like asking you to move the Empire State Building from this block 2 blocks over. Could be done, but obviously probably would be almost impossible to do. So that's the technology I want to see out there that is effective, that works, and you have to stay on top of it. You can't just develop it and walk away. You have to keep coming back and looking at it and to make sure what risks have come up since you developed it.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to revise and adapt constantly. Completely agree. So note to self, do not play chess with Frank. We're good on that. So let's stick with this topic. And I'm gonna word the question opposite ways now, because I'm curious. So of all the criminal activity you've been associated with, as the one preventing the crime, what is your most favorite or most memorable?
I think probably the work that I have done with banks, financial institutions around the world over the years in developing things like positive pay, things to prevent check forgery, reconciliation programs, ways for banks to train their employees and educate their employees not to be at risk. I'll go on and do a webinar next week with Chase Bank. They will have 10,000 of their employees online. We'll be just doing a refresher of things that they need to know in their call centers and their bank branches, etc. I have always believed that education is the most powerful tool to fighting crime. But whether I'm training an FBI agent or I'm training a law enforcement officer or I'm training a banker or a business individual, if I say to you, here's your risk, this is how they do it, and this is how they would rip you off, you're smart enough to go, well, I'm going to go close that door. I don't sell anything. I've never sold anything in my 3,000 seminars. I've never promoted any products or endorsed any products. I strictly believe that I can educate you to do it so you don't have to spend a fortune to protect yourself. But if you give the people the right tools to work with, people will do the things necessary to protect themselves. It's that we live in a world where, unfortunately, most people are honest. And because they're honest, they do not have a deceptive mind. So these things never enter their mind that someone could do this to me, someone could take advantage of me like this. That never even comes into play. So if I can put that in their mind and they get to understand it and see how simple it is to do, then they're smart enough to go take those recommendations to make sure they don't fall victim to that.
So there's been many infamous financial breaches over the years, and I think the answer is going to be very similar to what we just talked about. So Equifax, JP Morgan Chase, we mentioned a few already. Is there anything those companies could have done differently or in general to prevent those breaches?
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer, and I've dealt with breaches going back to TJ Maxx 15, 20 years ago, all the way up now to breaches against Facebook and Citibank and you name it. The one thing I've always found is that every breach occurs because somebody in that company did something they weren't supposed to do, or somebody in that company failed to do something they were supposed to do. Hackers really don't cause breaches, people do. So in the case of Equifax, they failed to update their system. They failed to install their security patches from Microsoft. The hackers got in, sat there for several months, decided what to steal, and they stole 145 million identities, 12 million driver's licenses. I live in South Carolina, where 4 years ago, a hacker got into our tax revenue office and stole 3.8 million tax returns, including mine, of the citizens of South Carolina. They had your social security number, your wife's social security number, your children's social security number, because you listed them as dependents. They had your earnings. When that occurred, I was called by one of the local papers, and they asked me what I thought happened, because they said the state tax revenue office said they did nothing wrong. I said that would be absolutely impossible. Somebody did something wrong. Turned out an employee took home a laptop they weren't supposed to take home. We opened it in an unrestricted environment. The hacker got in, stole the information. Our governor then, Nikki Haley, who was a former ambassador to UN now, she ordered that they simply provide 1 year credit monitoring service. The state would pick up the tab. I sent her an email the next day and said that would be a waste of the taxpayers' money and a waste of the taxpayers' time. Always remember, if I steal mass data, I'm going to warehouse that data for 3-4 years. Only an idiot would put that data immediately into the marketplace. I'm going to warehouse that data. But the longer I hold it, the more useful it is to me and the more valuable it is to me when I go to sell it. So I already know you gave them 1 year credit monitoring, 2 years of credit monitoring. I'm not going to do anything during that period of time. I'm going to wait and sell it. So sure enough, 3 or 4 years later, the people in South Carolina started seeing problems with people stealing their identities. So doing that would really serve no purpose. We have to educate our employees. I remind people during the month of October, which is Cyber Awareness Month, normally every day of the week during that month for the last 5 years, I'm at a Fortune 100 company in-house talking to their employees. And I tell them that the most important job they have is keeping the company's information safe. Whether they're the CEO or they're the janitor, the most important job they have is keeping the information entrusted to them by their clients and their customers safe. That's their most important job, and we teach them how to do that.
Oh, that's true. We always preach data management, data management, data management. So very interesting. We read a few eye-opening stats, scary. I'm bouncing back and forth on my notes here. I apologize. But on some of these scary stats, I'm sure keep our customers up at night. I'm actually curious what keeps you up at night.
Well, to be honest, I'm very concerned where we're going now with cybercrime. Right up until now, cyber is all about stealing money or stealing data, and data is money. So it is basically a financial crime. But we have the ability now, for example, to shut someone's pacemaker off or speed it up, or any bodily device they have on them controlled by a chip. But we are restricted to 35 feet. But if I'm in 35 feet of you walking by you on the sidewalk, I could basically assassinate you. We have the ability now, currently, to pull over a vehicle on the interstate. 40 computer components in it. So we can shut the motor off, we can lock the power windows, lock the car doors, turn on the airbag. We can do that now. So my question is, 5 years from now, is that 35 feet, 350 miles, 3,500 miles? So I think in the next 5-6 years, cyber is going to also get very scary. It's going to be used as a tool from foreign actors who are basically going to try to shut down electrical grids, going to try to shut down banking systems. And of course, I remind companies all the time, you have to be a little smarter, you have to be a little wiser today than you did 25 years ago. You have to be proactive. It amazes me that people who do not have the proper technology in place to keep their customers and their companies safe with the excuse that, oh, that'll never happen to me, or, I don't want to spend the money. Listen, we all have insurance on our house. We have insurance on our life. We don't think anything's going to happen to us tomorrow. We don't think our house is going to burn down tomorrow. But we have insurance to eliminate that possibility. And companies today have to put a lot of thought into just doing that. They have got to get the right technology in place and do the right things. Look, I'm all about cyber insurance, but I wouldn't write cyber insurance unless I told the company, these are the things you have to have in place for me to write this policy. If I find out there's a loss and you weren't doing this, or you didn't have this technology in place, I'm not going to cover that loss. So today we have to really get very serious about using the great technology that's out there. We have it, but if you don't use it, it's worthless.
So speak on the subject of cyber insurance. What are your thoughts on that? Are you seeing more and more people going into that, in terms of acceptance, et cetera?
To speak to Chubb and a number of companies a few years ago when they started thinking about writing cyber insurance. And I kind of had to smile because 25 years, 30 years earlier, I was talking to them about writing errors in emissions insurance, where they were writing forgery bonds and forgery insurance. And I told them, you have to make sure the company has segregation of duties, that they have best practices, that they're reconciling in a timely manner. All of these things that would be necessary in order for you to insure them. So they put that into their policies. And if it turned out you only had one bookkeeper and she was writing, signing, and reconciling, they didn't pay the claim. So jump ahead, today I'm telling them the same thing. Cyber insurance is a good thing to have, but you as an insurance company need to make sure the company you're insuring is doing the things that are necessary to protect that company. Otherwise, you're taking a tremendous risk. So again, there's great technology out there. You want to make sure that company is installing those technologies, using that technology, educating their employees. If I'm going to write the policy and I'm going to take the risk. So like any insurance, it's good as long as you're doing the necessary things on the other side to protect yourself.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So I was able to watch a YouTube video, I think it was about a year ago, and I thought there was something interesting. It doesn't have much to do with the technology and what we do, but I think it's interesting for the people on here. Your thoughts on credit cards versus debit cards?
I wrote many years ago in one of my books, Stealing Your Life, I wrote about that I never, ever use a debit card, never owned a debit card. Every day of my life, I spend the credit card company's money. Credit card, not credit debit card, credit card. American Express, Discover, Visa, MasterCard. Every day of my life, I spend their money. My money is never at risk because my money is in a market account somewhere. No one knows where it is. I go to the dry cleaner, I give my credit card. I go to the grocery store, I give my credit card. I put fuel in my boat, I use my credit card. Everywhere I travel, and I travel 3 to 4 days a week when I'm traveling around the world, I use my credit card. Now, I will do everything in my power to make sure no one gets that card number, but if they do, and tomorrow they charge $1 million on my credit card, by federal law, my liability is zero. When I use my credit card and I pay the bill every month or the minimum due, my credit score goes up. So I enhance my credit and my credit score. When you use a debit card, every time you reach for it, you're exposing the money in your account. Once that money's stolen, you have to convince the bank to put the money back. So in every post-investigation we do of a retail breach, when you ask someone, they say, yeah, I was in Target, but I used my bank's Visa card, and 2 days later they canceled my card and they sent me a new card. That's all I know about it. The other person says, no, I used my debit card off my credit union. They took $3,000 out of my checking account. Took about 3 months to get my money back. And so I only use a credit card. And as far as, because people are going to always ask, how do you get cash? I tell my bank I only want an ATM card. Do not send me a card that's an ATM debit card. I only want an ATM card. This allows me to get cash anywhere in the world, but I am governed by the same laws that govern my credit card, and I have zero liability should someone get into my account. And if I was young using any of these financial service products like Venmo and so on, I would make sure that that's backed by a credit card, not backed by a debit card. And if I already possess a credit debit card, I would bring the debit lock down to $1 so that my risk is gone.
Very nice. When it comes to the Venmos and the Zelles and all those electronic transfers, and even the Apple Cash and things like that, the Apple Cash at the cashiers, and what are your thoughts on that? Is that comparable from a debit card standpoint, or is that still safe?
I don't even worry about those things, and I tell people, if you like using those things, as long as you backed it by a credit card, your risk is zero. So you don't have to be concerned about what if something happens, or someone breaches our system, or someone misuses my card or gets into my card. Those are not your liabilities, and that's why the credit card, I think, is the safest tool that exists in the United States today, and that's why I only carry a credit card. And it doesn't matter whose card it is, whether it's Amex, Visa, MasterCard, Discover card. The key is that you want to use that credit card. And then, I had 3 sons that went off to college, and I said to them, I'm not giving you a debit card. I'm giving you a credit card. But because you're 18, you have no credit. I applied for the card and guaranteed it. So it's your card, but I guaranteed it. Now, three things are going to happen. The bill comes to me and I'm responsible for the bill. So if you're out spending a lot of money in a bar, I'm going to know it because I get the bill every month. And when I pay the bill every month, it goes on your credit, reflects on your credit. So while you're away at college for 4 years, you'll be building credit in your name. And third, I can restrict the limit of that card. You go to school here, you go to school over here, you have this limit, you have this limit. And all three sons came out of college with credit scores in the 800. If they wanted to buy a car, they wanted to buy a house, they wanted to rent an apartment, they didn't need me to co-sign that note. Unfortunately, today, a lot of young people, out of convenience, use only a debit card. So they graduate from college, they get a great job, they go to rent an apartment, fill out the lease, and they say, son, you don't have any credit. You don't even have a credit file at the credit bureau. I can't lease you the apartment. You'll need to have your parents or someone co-sign the lease. So for young people, it's very smart to start building credit at a very early age. And I remind people, credit is not what credit was 30 years ago. Do I get the car? Do I get the house? Everything today is based on your credit. If I apply for a job, they check my credit. If I apply for auto insurance, they check my credit. I apply for life insurance, they check my credit. Everything is based on your credit. So building a good credit history and building good credit is very important for young people to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. When we talk about young people, it sparks the social aspect of it. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the, social media and how people can protect themselves from social media.
I'm not on any social media whatsoever, though I have 3 sons and 5 grandchildren that like social media. I've always taught them to use it correctly. So I tell people the easiest thing to remember, if you tell me on social media, such as Facebook, where you were born and your date of birth, that's 98% of me stealing your identity. Those are what we refer to as keys, and those are 2 keys I need out of 3 to get your identity. So I tell people, never tell anybody where you were born or your date of birth and post it on social media or Facebook. And of course, we give away way too much information about ourselves on Facebook, and then we wonder why people are stealing our identities. And if I can share this just with you for a moment, I've been dealing with phishing emails teaching at the academy since they started. And for years and years, they were very easy to spot: poor grammar, poor spelling. Today, the kind of emails I see, and let me just share one with you. This is from an actual email from the CEO to the CFO of a technology company in Southern California with approximately 4,000 employees. And the email simply read, "Good morning, Jeff. Wonderful dinner at your home last night. Please thank your wife, Susan. My wife, Sally, and I had a great time. As I mentioned to you over dinner, I'm traveling this week to Nashville, Tennessee to attend a seminar. I'll be back on Monday. I forgot to mention to you that I need you to wire these funds out this morning to this charity that I promised they would have it by 10 a.m. Here's the instructions. Please take care of it. Signed, Rob." What they're doing is going to social media where there is a picture of the CEO and his wife and their name. There's a picture of the CFO and his wife and her name. When he registered to attend that conference 2 months earlier, he said on Facebook, "I'm going to the conference. I'll be there." And literally, they're using social media in real time to make that email so exact, so timely within a matter of hours or minutes that we immediately believe it must be real. I just had lunch with this person. They're responding to my lunch. So today you have to be extremely careful about those types of emails, especially when they're requesting you to perform something, as sending money or giving information.
Oh, that's so for all the people that use Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff, even Yelp, probably not a good idea to check into where your location is with who you're hanging out with based on that. That's awesome. Frank, I got a couple more questions for you. So can you identify a single moment that turned your life around or changed your career?
Yes, I know that people only know me from the movie. They really don't know me after the movie. And, it would be very easy for me to say, look, I went to prison, I was rehabilitated. I went to prison, I saw the light, I was born again. but I would be lying to you. When I came out of prison at 26 years old, I don't think I was any different person than the person that went into prison. I simply had the opportunity to go to work for my government, and I saw that just as an opportunity to get out of prison. I never dreamed where it would take me. But at first, I found myself surrounded by thousands of men and women who were so loyal, had incredible ethics and character, love of country, love of family, that you couldn't help that wear off on you. Those things started to affect me, but when I watched how these people led their lives and how ethical they were and how much character they all had and how much love for their family had, then on an undercover assignment, I met my wife. I didn't have a dime to my name. When it was over, I broke protocol to tell her who I really was. I eventually asked her to marry me against the wishes of her parents. She did, and she changed my life. She gave me 3 beautiful children. She believed in me, trusted me, had faith in me, and she turned my life around. Everything I've had, everything I've achieved, who I am today is because of the love of a woman and the respect 3 boys have for their father, something I would never, ever jeopardize.
No, that's awesome. It's we preach a lot here at Technology, the family aspect. So it's wonderful to hear things like that from that side. So, well, with time running short, I'll hold off on my Leo and my Steven Spielberg questions, but I do have one last question for you before we wrap up, Frank. And Technology is known for our tons of technical talent that can help you with security initiatives and beyond. And so my question to you, Frank, is: do you concur?
I concur.
I love it. That's my favorite scene. So I love it. Well, Frank, thank you again. It has been an absolute pleasure sharing this virtual stage with you. Thank you to everyone that was able to join us today. I hope I get to sit down in person with each and every one of you when we finally get out of this timeout. Until then, please don't hesitate to reach out so we can continue the conversation and discuss how we can make your journey comfortable. As a reminder, there's a short survey at the end, so please take the time to fill that out, and we appreciate your feedback. Again, thank you, Frank. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and God bless.
Trent.